also how those successful businesses are starting to panic and realizing they have to get this thing called innovation, and most of them don't know what this thing called innovation is. So I'm collecting examples as I travel of companies that really get it. In fact, the cover article of our magazine this month is about a Chinese company, Xiaomi, which is a $45 billion company that makes hardware, smartphones, tablets, TVs, but it makes zero margin on the hardware. But as I'll explain, it's found innovative business models to build on top of this that are bringing in quite a lot of revenue. So the headline we had was, "It's time to copy China now." Think of how quickly our own behavior is changing because of Moore's law, a new technology coming from the edges, going mainstream really quickly. Think of what we understand as a technology like drones, which was 10 years ago, I guess, limited to the military. Every week there's some crazy new development. You're going to have some more, I think, tomorrow. But just this was the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas in January. This is a Chinese company called beim that's developing a drone that can carry a person. So maybe this is the way you'll be skiing next year.
We have the application designed for Yihang 184. After setting up the flight plan with a single click, user can take off on any location, sit, relax, and enjoy the flight.
You ready for this? Which is how you'll be commuting to work.
Always keeping in mind.
Think of, not what is the future, but what's happening now. Think of Amazon, how quickly it's developing its drone fleet to get products to you in real time. This is now. Think of how it's changing entertainment. This is a guy called Alex Chacon who has a YouTube channel in which he travels around the world with his drone taking selfies of him. It's got a lot of traffic. It must be really hard for Alex Chacon to get a date because the girl knows he's always going to be paying attention up there. And that's just drones. Think about robotics and artificial intelligence and how quickly that is going mainstream and how it's changing behavior. Think of the completely autonomous car and what's that going to mean to us.
I'm not touching it at all.
So this is the Tesla that actually downloaded the software to make it autonomous automatically overnight. And these things are coming to the highway near you soon. Think of robotics. This is a company that Google bought a couple of years ago, Boston Dynamics. It was making robots, I guess, mostly for the military. It's now consumerizing them. It's finding business uses for the robots. It's really sophisticated technology that's coming down in price as the sensors, as the servos become cheaper.
We get to see the guy with the evil broom.
We get to see the guy with the evil broom.
Little bastard. Oh. He's in trouble. When the drone finds out where he sleeps. Okay.
You're saying, it's a robot.
I mean, he's still an asshole.
He's okay, he's cool. These are going to be taking over the world sometime soon.
This is how the war with the machines started.
This is a robot chef that we covered at Wired. It's been programmed to copy the movements of well-known chefs. So there's going to be consumer applications sooner or later. And, after robotics, what about personal robots? So I'm seeing lots of things that maybe aren't necessarily quite ready for mainstream. This is a fun project out of Singapore University. This is an attempt to replace your PA, your assistant.
Hello, nice to see you. What is your job? I am a social companion. I can speak of emotions and I can recognize people. I recognize you're Nadia. Nice to meet you again today.
I don't think that's going to replace. I think Angela, you're safe for the moment. I think the hotel receptionist, she's fine. And then suddenly something new comes along. This year it's going to be these devices, and very quickly all sorts of businesses are having to rethink how do we interact with our audience. If you're in the travel business, very quickly the expectation is going to be you provide a virtual reality tour of the ski slopes of the hotel, of the beach. And crazy things happen. So there's one company in virtual reality called Magic Leap that has raised $1.3 billion and doesn't have a product yet. It's just put like 2 videos online teasing what it may be offering. This is one of the videos. So it may be $1.3 billion to invest in miniature flying elephants. But we don't know. But it's very quick. And then add facial recognition, what's coming around the corner with technology that reads your emotion. My favourite use case so far for face recognition is this American company, Churchix, which tells the vicar who pretended to be in the congregation on Sunday but wasn't actually there. But mostly in the short term, the big companies are being disrupted by still the move to mobile and the way that's changing how people are spending money. There was a question posed on Reddit 2 years ago that if somebody from the 1950s suddenly appeared today, what would be the hardest thing to explain to them about modern life? My favourite answer somebody posted was, I possess a device in my pocket that's capable of accessing the entirety of information known to man, and I use it to look at pictures of cats and get into arguments. And if you look at your own behaviour, it's probably not that rational. The mobile changes all sorts of things. And it changes your engagement. This is a slide from Mary Meeker at Kleiner Perkins last year. How much time American adults have been spending on their digital devices from 2008 to last year. The green is the mobile, the blue is the laptop or the desktop, the yellow is everything else. But what's really interesting is Americans have gone from 2.7 hours a day looking at the screens in 2008. It's doubled to 5.6 hours a day. That's doubled. That's time they're not spending talking to their colleagues, walking into a meeting. That's time they spend there. And this sort of fundamental shift is going to hit every bank. It's going to hit every retail organisation. It's going to hit every media company. We're now so addicted to our apps that there are apps to tell you how many times a day you're checking your apps. New medical conditions. This one is called the 3-dot anxiety. And of course, the way we use these devices. I was in China recently. They don't have religion in China. Well, narcissism, I guess they have. Everyone was taking pictures of themselves. And the selfie, that's not cool anymore. It's the rear end selfie. This is a product called the Belfie that was launched a year and a half ago to take a picture of yourself. Because stuff that you would have laughed at like a few months ago is another business model. So Kim, the queen of the Belfie, gave away a free iPhone and Android game a year and a half ago. You didn't have to pay to download it, you could pay a little bit of credit inside the game to move quickly. In 5 months her free game earned her $43 million, which to me is just completely irrational. So how does a big successful company with an established business model with fixed investment costs, with a staff trained for one set of behaviours, how do they move? How do they innovate? I'm going to share very quickly 10 protocols, 10 methodologies I'm seeing, and give you some examples of how companies are doing it. And I guess the first and most powerful one is create circumstances where different kinds of ideas and different kinds of people can collide. And then you can create new ways of saying things. Tony Hsieh created an American retail business called Zappos, which he sold to Amazon for almost $1 billion. And he's always been obsessed with how you can create the conditions of a party in commercial life. So if you go into the downtown Las Vegas headquarters of Zappos. This is what it looks like. And there's people doing like conga lines through the office and random parties. And the downtown bit of Las Vegas is not the expensive real estate. It's 20 miles from the big casinos. There's no fresh food you can get there. So he is taking a $350 million bet of his own money to try and create the conditions where you can create collisions. And he's investing in startups and theatres and nurseries and restaurants. And he wants to create what he calls the 3 Cs. Tony Hsieh's vision of reviving downtown Las Vegas is create a space where there are collisions, co-learning and connectedness. And there's a lot of this mindset in some of the very fast growth California tech companies. And I think there's a connection with the Burning Man adventure phenomenon. Every August, 70,000, 80,000 people go to the Nevada desert and build a temporary city. It's a non-cash economy, it's a gift economy, but they clear up everything afterwards. It's an amazing experiment. But when you bring 80,000 people together simply to explore identity and to share creativity, you get amazing things resulting. And I guess you wouldn't have the collaborative economy, you wouldn't have Airbnb if that mindset hadn't been tested in places like Burning Man. And this idea of getting people who think in different ways together to see what results is starting to affect how businesses are designing their office space. Steve Jobs was early when Pixar was planning to knock down the main building and build 3 different buildings, one for the animators, one for the producers, one for the management. Steve Jobs said, no, we just want one building, but more importantly, one set of bathrooms near the entrance so everybody gets to meet and to mix. And there are other experiments happening in how you can use workspace to create clashes, collisions. This one is in Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's called Grid 70. And there's different kind of companies sharing the same workspace, but sharing the same conference room that they can each go into. So Wolverine makes boots, Steelcase makes office furniture, Amway sells all sorts of things. And they say it provides fresh insights, challenging how we think by getting people from another business. And London in particular is starting to fill up with these new shared workspaces. This is a company I'm a bit involved with called Second Home in East London, where there's a couple of hundred people in the building, some of them just renting a chair by the month, some of them with studio space. And it's everything from hardware companies, advertising companies. Santander Bank has put its finance innovation team in there. And it's because they see this as a way of challenging their thinking by mixing the influences they're getting. And you start to see even, let's say, a very traditional business that hasn't really innovated, like the insurance business, by working with startups in these sorts of collisions, they can create new opportunities. There's a telematics startup in the UK called The Flow that's monitoring how individuals are moving, both in their cars but through their devices. It's now working with some of the big insurance companies in the UK. So maybe they won't charge an annual policy, maybe they'll charge a per hour policy. So another thing that some companies are effectively doing is getting other people outside the company to do their innovation for them. This is Jeffrey Immelt of GE, huge industrial conglomerate, layers of management, very hard for that company to move quickly. So they've collaborated with a relatively new company called Local Motors that allows the crowd to design cars and then they build cars. But what they've done is they've created a workspace, a hackerspace called First Build in St. Louis, where anybody can come in and start prototyping new kind of products. If you're trying to create a new kind of air conditioner inside GE, it might take you 2 years and $20 million. If a group of hackers, hardware hackers, does it in here, it might take a couple of months and maybe $50,000. And GE knows that if something works, they can take it inside the company. And they're taking risks. It doesn't always pay off. They worked with a startup called Quirky, where the crowd could suggest inventions. Quirky went out of business a few months ago, but GE had given the Quirky crowd access to its IP portfolio to say, if you have ideas for products that we haven't thought of, well, let's make it together. So banks are now starting to find ways to outsource their innovation, working with startups. Barclays has a project with Techstars, working closely with finance tech startups. Tesco, the supermarket, is sponsoring a workspace next to the Tower of London called Rainmaker's Loft. It's a two-way conversation. Telcos like Telefonica are working with startups. I think the smartest of these businesses are opening their minds about where their talent is and realizing it's not always inside the business. So another thing you can do is distribute innovation to the edge of your own customer base. So this is Lei Jun, the man on the front of our magazine, this Chinese company that's often seen as, you know, China's attempt to be Apple. He doesn't like it if you call him the Chinese, because they make hardware and they have the hunger of a startup, and they have to understand what the customer on the street wants in real time. And then Xiaomi says to them, so we'll give you access to our supply chain, we'll put our logo on the side of your product, and we'll sell, you know, maybe 10 million air purifiers or battery power banks. The company they invested in is now the biggest maker of power banks in the world. That's where Xiaomi is making its margins and selling these accessories plus extra services. Companies like Samsung know that they're probably not going to develop the longer lasting battery inside Samsung, so they are making smart investment decisions in other companies that may well be able to do that. This is an Israeli company, StoreDot, that Samsung invested in last year. It's using nanotech to redefine how quickly your battery will keep charging. So this is their demo of the 45-second charging nowhere. They now say they can do electric car batteries charging from zero in about 5 minutes. Samsung got very excited. Think of Disney. You would think Disney as a creative company could innovate by itself, but no, they are working with startups. Bob Iger was personally mentoring one of the startups that Disney had invested in, called Sphero, that makes this little ball that moves around the floor. You can control it from your phone. Just before Christmas, Bob Iger was thinking, we got this film called Star Wars coming out. I wonder if we could help promote Star Wars and get some revenue from toys by getting Sphero to redesign their ball. This became one of the big selling items at Christmas. So, I guess the great nature of the Kickstarter type platform is that distributes innovation everywhere. Barriers to entry are zero. Famous case, Eric with his idea for a smartwatch 2 years before Apple was talking about one. The Pebble, he raised $20 million on Kickstarter in the last round. A group of amateurs. But there is this wider culture of maker fairs where, just in hardware, people are hacking away, they're inventing things with a hunger, with a desire to take risks that big companies can't do. So the big companies, I guess, need to find a way of getting inside that world. Or you could get your customers to innovate for you. This is Pete, the founder of a Chinese company called OnePlus. Again, a phone company that makes high-quality, relatively low phones. And they are obsessed about getting feedback from the customer. They have talk threads and they follow up on the requests of the customer, and then they update the phones. There was a lot of excitement on the talk threads. What if we could have a bamboo framed phone So OnePlus starts issuing one. So the power of your community, Xiaomi is also using its community. They call them the fans, the Mi fans. They have parties with their fans every few weeks. You can go and dance with senior executives from the company. It's a crazy cult type thing. When I was in there, Hugo Barra, who used to run Android at Google, who now works on internationalizing Xiaomi, the fans send in action toys in the shape of Hugo Barra. It's like a cult. But it's also happening in other kind of sectors, in finance, for instance, building a business around a community. German bank that's now internationalizing its move to the UK, they say up to about 20% of their staff from the community chat boards, because they want people who are enthusiasts about the company. It's a different kind of bank. It's having developer days. It's bringing developers inside to try and work out what products they should be making. It's even giving its software onto GitHub, the repository of software, so other people can improve it. I don't know many banks that are built around communities, but I think it creates that emotional connection, which gives you a big market advantage. Another thing I'm seeing is organizations in any kind of sector working out how to activate their team to start thinking, how can we come up with a better product? How can we rethink our experiences? And it's giving them space away from the day-to-day job. I went to Atlanta in Georgia, to the home of America's biggest fast food chicken sandwich chain. It's bigger than Kentucky Fried Chicken. It's called Chick-fil-A. It sells so many chicken sandwiches. In fact, it's got an advertising campaign that's pretty effective. Cows want you to eat more chicken. What's really interesting though is the company started in 1949, still owned by the family, no debt, no external investors, and it's opening maybe 80, 100 branches a year. Very profitable. And they know that even though they're just selling chicken sandwiches, they have to keep improving, keep innovating. So at headquarters, they've got an 80,000 square foot, an 8,000 square meter building, just there to get the staff from around America to come in and play for a few days on innovation. It's called The Hatch. And you can go in there and invent new recipes. You can go in there and decide what kind of company Chick-fil-A should be. You can play with 3D printers and virtual reality. When I went in there, they were working on a scientific experiment about how to optimize the way people stand in line. That gives them an edge. That makes everybody inside the company feel engaged in constantly rethinking what the company is. And one of the things that they've done through this project is they've reinvented the way to cook chicken. They've come up with a whole new type of grill that heats using 3 different kinds of heaters, cooks the chicken more quickly and keeps more moisture in there. So that's very big news in the world of chicken sandwiches. Or you can allow people completely outside your industry to take control. It's a really good example, the UK government. It wanted to transform the online experience of interacting with government. In the UK, we spend a lot of our time buying things online. But what if all your transactions with government, from renewing your driving license to paying your taxes, could be as seamless as going into an Uber car? So they got a team of software people and design people from the startup world and basically said, okay, do what you need to do. And they started thinking about things in a new way. What if government were a platform, like a software platform? This is Mike Bracken, who was running the project, talking about users. Governments don't usually talk about users. It's about user needs. Their ethos was, let's build products that people want to use. And I'll give you one example of how the outsider's mindset solved some big problems.
The service is, it's a very quick transaction, but it allows a visitor to book a prison visit 24/7 from their home computer or their mobile phone. The only way that you used to be able to book a prison visit is the prison would have to generate a paper form that the prisoner would fill out. It would then be posted by mail to the visitor, who would then receive this paper form. They'd have to then call up and book a visit on the phone.
There are people in prison who struggle to see their kids because it's very difficult to get through the phone lines. This makes it much easier for people to make those bookings and see their families.
The new service is called Prison Visits, really simple. What we ask people to do is to choose one visit date and then 2 other alternative visit date and times in case the first one can't be accommodated.
So it works. It solves big problems. Bureaucrats wouldn't have solved this problem, outsiders would. And in Washington, they're hiring people from the startup world. Megan Smith is now Chief Technology Officer in Washington. She was working at companies like Google. DJ Patil, the Chief Data Officer, was from the West Coast working with VC companies, having his own business. Something else you can do if you want to get the spirit of innovation in your business or your organisation is create an open competition. Because when you do that, interesting things happen. So back to government. In New York, they created apps competitions, which they called the Big App competition. And people took public feeds of data from all sorts of aspects of New York, you know, which restaurants have had health violations. Someone creates an app called Don't Eat App. And when you create a grand challenge, you get talent coming out and solving things that you hadn't really planned. DARPA, the American Government Defense Research Agency, famously uses grand challenges to see if people can think ahead on solving problems, particularly facing government, the military. And about a decade ago, it had a challenge: can you get a car to drive a long distance through the desert by itself? And nobody made the standards until just about a decade ago.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's been done.
That car is called Stanley, and it's got a whole bunch of sensors on the roof, and that is the first car to pass the challenge of autonomously getting through the desert. And then Google starts to hire the team, Sebastian Thrun and other people behind that project, and then Google starts working on a self-driving car project, and that gives it legitimacy, and then Tesla and Audi and BMW are all now working on this. And if it hadn't been for that grand challenge, we wouldn't have safer roads coming in. You know, about 1.2 million people are killed on the roads every year, mostly through human error. Autonomous cars are going to save a lot of lives. So think of how you can create these challenges to... In Singapore, well, they're constantly thinking about where does the city go from here. They're setting these grand challenges. I was at a Swiss banks or a Swiss finance organisation's hackathon in London on Friday, and there were people coming all night to try and get the kudos of winning. This is one example that came out of Singapore.
The app that tells you where to find available parking. And you know what the cool part is? That you can book a spot when you're nearby.
We created this amazing app during the Up Singapore weekend.
And you get talent coming from anywhere, solving things. So another thing, I guess, is creating a new mindset inside the organisation to allow people feel that they can experiment. And you'll be familiar with the sorts of posters you have in businesses like Facebook. Daniel Ek, inside Spotify, again, wants to create a culture where people experiment. He's created a system of small units, 15 to 30 people as the company scales. He still wants little units that experiment. And yet he's created a system of tribes and guilds, so people come between these units and start collaborating, start sharing knowledge. Supercell, one of Europe's most successful games companies, wants people to experiment and take risks, and then if it doesn't make something good enough to launch, they celebrate with champagne.